Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery programming series for our current show, A Common Thread, curated by Karen Peterson and Shar Norman. Today we are thrilled to present the artist Elsie Sanchez. As a brief reminder, everyone tuning in today is in listen-only mode, so feel free to utilize that chat function to ask questions, and I'll be sure to get to them at the end of the talk. Also, please keep in mind that because we're presenting from separate locations, there might be some variation of bandwidth. So if one of us freezes up or the sound fluctuates, thanks in advance for bearing with us. All right, thanks everyone, and welcome, Elsie.
Thank you, Kat. And I want to thank you and your staff, the Ohio Arts Council, and of course, Karen Peterson and Shar Norman for their vision and for including me in this show. I really appreciate it. So, my name is Elsie Sanchez, and I'm a local artist. I was born in Havana, Cuba, right there. And I lived in the city of Miramar, which is where the red arrow is. We lived about a block from the Gulf of Mexico. And at the age of 9, my mother, father, my brother, and I immigrated to the United States. We went directly to Miami. But on the way, so we were boarding the plane, the government folks came and grabbed my dad and took him away from us and told him he had to stay back. So we were told just to keep going and board the plane. We didn't know what was going on. We were sort of concerned because he was the only one that spoke English fluently. And so days later, after we were in Miami, we found out that the reason was that my dad had sold his car to a friend privately. And so the government had been watching him. So he was forced to find his friend, buy the car back and turn it over to the government. And then he was able to join us. He said it was a matter of weeks, that he was detained, but it just felt like years. Anyway, so that was good. And then here's me in Cuba celebrating my 9th birthday. I came at the age of 9. I knew that 2 months from when this picture was taken, that I would be leaving. And I think the hardest part was leaving my pets, because I knew I would never see them again. My grandmother and my great aunt lived with us. I always just knew that I would eventually see them. And I did. Years later, they were able to come. But many family members I never saw again. So while in Miami, my dad had a difficult time finding a full-time job. And so months later, we came to Columbus because his best friends had come before us from Cuba and lived here. And so we stayed with them till we got settled. The color photograph is my 10th birthday. So that was a year later here in Columbus. And I was surrounded by Cuban kids. At that time, there was a large Cuban population. My brother's on one side. Vicky is on the other. Vicky was the daughter of my parents' best friend. So I grew up with her in Cuba. So it was very comforting having her as I learned the language. Then let's see, high school, I really didn't take too many art classes. I painted on my own. I drew a lot. My dad used to draw a lot. So I would see him drawing and I would say, I can do that. And that's how this whole thing started anyway. So, but after high school, I attended Columbus Business University thinking I needed a stable job. And 1 quarter towards graduation, I quit and I traveled throughout the United States, mostly west of Ohio. I held odd jobs, the Sears Distribution Center, telemarketing. I worked at the State Fair in the summer. And so it wasn't until my mid-20s that I gave in to my art degree, and I enrolled at OSU. And at that time I was working already working full-time at OSU, first in the physiology department and then in the Hispanic student program. So it took me a while to graduate, but I did, and then I went directly to grad school. So I thought I would just talk a little bit about where I started, you know, from the very beginning. And the examples that I'm giving here, between those examples, I branched out a lot, but I always came back to these images and spent most of my time doing this. So let's see. So this is how I started. This was this undergraduate work. I don't remember if I actually did this in class or if I did it at home, but it was while I was enrolled in OSU. So I did a lot of this. It was meditating. I enjoyed doing the texture of the cloth, the reflection of the glass. I love the way the light hit the surfaces in the body, and always try to capture a mood. Then, like most of us, I use myself a lot in self-portraits, looking in the mirror. So eventually, I became disinterested in so much in the figure. I just looked at it as an object, and I was more interested in what was around it, the fields of color, the modulation of color, what one color did to the next. And then this picture was really, I was sitting in a dark room, so I made up the light here and through these shadows, which probably make absolutely no sense. But so from the very beginning, I was interested in just large fields of color, and this was just another self-portrait. Then I was influenced. I felt like at this point I was influenced a lot by my professors. Of course, you know, they were wonderful, and I just didn't feel like these were my own, but it was a good exploration in still the fields of color, the, you know, subtlety, and this removing paint, which I still do to this day. I mean, the painting on the left, most of that painting is just wiped off and left raw. So, and I was using these symbols as metaphors for the body. Let's see, Vessel and Dream. And they're large paintings, 78 by 58 and 80 by 56. Then I started to use these objects, which suggested an idea or a feeling or an experience in these fields of color. And I was exploring different medium, like stand oil, and I had a book that was mediums for artists. And so I spent time like putting down paint, and just when it was tacky, I would put the last layer and seeing what would pick up and how it would inform what I was trying to say. So, and then towards the end of my undergraduate degree, I became very interested in more geometric forms. And at this time, I mean, I did other things, but these paintings here, when I was thinking of like the altar pieces in the churches, and also in Cuba, every home had like these religious icons on their mantle, you know. So I wanted to give these shapes the same kind of reverence as those sacred altar pieces. And so I explore a lot with the fields, trying to get this sublime kind of concept. And much of the paint here again is wiped off and left. I never taped. I wanted the vulnerability of my hand to be seen. And I was attracted to this upside down fork because it had a little edge to it, you know, and so later on I continued to explore that. So this is how I ended my undergrad degree, with this kind of work. Then I went directly to grad school, and then I had this wonderful opportunity to be an exchange student in Cuenca, Spain. Cuenca is right there where the red thing. And So it was a little town, probably about 42,000 at the time. And it was known for its hanging house. I was there for 3 months, and it was September or October, November, December, I think. So it was cold. Now I went with a colleague of mine, Michael Rodriguez. So this is the university where we studied. At the time, there were a lot of power outages for some reason, so we couldn't spend a lot of time in the studio. Although, I sat in a lot of classes, and it was wonderful being able to speak Spanish for 3 months. And then let's see here. So Michael and I spent a lot of time exploring the city. It's like I said, Cuenca's known for its hanging houses, and the Museum of Abstract Art is located in that little house there. So I spent a lot of time there. They have work by Tapies, a lot of work by Tapies and Fernando Zobel. I don't recall seeing any women in this museum. I don't know. I mean, I don't recall. There may be. And then I spent a lot of time like visiting these churches, and became even more intrigued with the altarpiece idea. And so then when I returned, to OSU, I continued to explore this this subject, and trying to get these pristine fields of color, the subtlety. I've always been interested in subtlety, and a feeling of sublime or exaltation. They're large paintings, these, and then here's another one. So I would explore how long to leave the underlayer on, so that when I put the final layer on, it would lift some of it and keep, like, for example, in the left, the horizontal line intact. And then I removed what was, I thought of like an altarpiece, and just started to focus on these shapes. These are 7x7 paintings, and what was, between the legs and outside the legs, still trying to get some kind of meditative feeling with these. And then I did away with color, and still trying to capture depth, even though they were so dark. It's like I look back now and I'm thinking, oh my God, you spent all this, all these years like moving these shapes up and down, and it's like, it's sort of funny. I mean, it's serious, but I don't know. And then at the time I was doing those paintings, we had, the good thing about Ohio State was we had visiting artists each quarter. So, but Harmony Hammond was visiting when I was making those paintings, and that was such a treat. I mean, she's one of the pioneers of the feminist art movement in the 70s. She's the co-creator of the Air Gallery, of artist-run gallery of women art in New York City. And when I was looking for this picture, she's so active still, and was in the Whitney Biennial last year. So she was so positive and so amazing. So, and then years later, after I graduated from grad school, I continued to explore this business here. And I did away with color. I made a lot of gray paintings, and it just focused on the surface, just pristine, soft. I moved the altar began to go away, and then the insides came out or whatever. So this went on for a while. And so I started doing small ones on the table, and I let the brush marks. These were fast paintings, which I normally don't do, but I started to leave the horizontal and vertical lines, and they were what they were. And so eventually, the horizontal line started to dominate. The struggle was still there. There's always been that struggle in my work. It just seems like I have to dig myself out of a hole to connect to anything, you know, and I just accepted it. I try to make it simple. I can't. So, but so I became, there was still a lot of under painting in these. I was trying to achieve meditation, a little meditation and agitation. I mean, I need both of those things for me to connect to it, not because I want to, but because it's in me. So, and so there's a detail of that painting with all the little scratches and that kind of thing. And then at one point, also at the same time, I was still going with the altarpiece kind of concept. And I was feeling that I was piddling around and trying too hard to make a painting. You know, I don't know if it had run its course or what. I didn't feel like it was natural. So I started to strip the layers with paint stripper. And what happened was I exposed all the underpainting. And to me, I think that said more than what I was trying to do. So it just, you know, what developed is better than what I was imposing. And so there's another one. There's a detail of what came out of those paintings. And then just because of what I discovered by stripping these works, I started to use the canvas. So the little dots on these paintings is the gesso of the canvas. So I started digging deep and playing with, you know, the different layers, and then again, the canvas, the gesso canvas is there, and the rectangles inside were also just the gesso. And what I did was just take some thin paint and put it on and left what happened there. So it seems like, you know, I've always been after the same thing with maybe all my work, either, you know, just taking different shapes, but I've been like these sensations of that we all feel, to these abstract forms. And as far as influences, I've always loved Agnes Martin. I'm not sure, you know, my work is anything like her except for hers, except for the fact that she uses the grid and of course, you know, lines and that kind of thing. Because really, at the end, her latest work, she didn't want her hand to be seen. She would just take a pencil and draw lines across the canvas on top of a thread. So she didn't want her hand to be seen, and I'm all for, you know, for that. So, but I just love her philosophy. I love that she's lived her whole life with this life and painting philosophy. And you know, I think at some point she said she was trying to capture what she was after was trying to capture what was in between the raindrops. Anyway, but she didn't believe in joy and happiness were her thing. Those were perfection for her. And so she thought that maybe ideas and concepts got in the way of the work. But what I like about her is when I see her work, it just speaks to me very, very deeply. And so it forces me to get in my studio. So that's how she influences me. And I started put in these ovals because I didn't like round forms, and I wanted to challenge myself. And that's how this started. Same thing, you know, take this, most of this paint is wiped out and was left just, you know, even the first layer is there somewhere. And so eventually, let's see, at some point they took on this figurative kind of feel, you know, and it didn't last too long. But just about the time that I was doing these, I went back to Spain. And then I took all these pictures of pattern. I became very interested in the pattern everywhere around me. On the side of a building, a planter, on the floor, and even El Greco, the Greek painter's house, the studio, which was here in Toledo, here on the lower right. This was a facade of his studio. So, so when I came back, my paintings seemed to have taken more of a pattern kind of course, and they were very symmetrical. And let's see, it just I was interested in the power of repetition and the grit to express the movement. I wanted to create a pulsating feeling. I've always wanted to have these paintings do something besides just be there. So a lot of movement and a lot of vibration. Here's some more of that era. Continued with these. So it varied between the more oval shapes and the more grid-like. That's a detail of one of those paintings. So I was still leaving the gessoed canvas there, and removing and adding and all that kind of thing. Then this must have been a yellow period. And that lasted for a while. That's 2009. And I did some in paper and some smaller ones, 2010. I think here, this is called The Mist of Change. That was 2012. I think there was a change going on. I was still dealing with the same things. You know, I've always like taken off, putting on, moving, and that kind of thing. But I think those oval forms that were so distinct started to unravel. And I started to want to capture a presence, you know, like a human presence by the movement. I wanted him to pulsate so that they seemed to breathe. And then just about the time, in 2015, I was finally able to go back to Cuba. I hadn't been there since I was 9 years old. And this was through Michael Reese, thankfully. This was a cultural exchange. It was 10 years ago, so it wasn't the artists' exchanges that are taking place now. So it was just a group of people from all over the United States that weren't artists. So I had the opportunity at that time to go to the house I left, which is, I'm standing in front of the house I left. And I was so happy to see that it was there because I didn't know what to expect. I thought, I'm not even going to find it. And, but eventually we rang the doorbell, the owner came out, and I had some photos. He recognized my family who had stayed, you know, must have met some of them, I don't know, and led us through the house. And so I was able to go to my bedroom. My mom's bedroom now is a kitchen. And so that was like, that really changed my life because I've always yearned to connect. I didn't know, I always felt disconnected. So this changed my life really. And then the photo on the right is a block away from the house, where I used to go with my grandmother and my mom when I was little. So it's such a joy to go there and just put my feet in the water. We also had the opportunity I told my dad I would find his father's grave, and we found it thanks to the group. I mean, the grave is falling apart, but because we don't have any family there to take care of it, but it's still there. So in 2015, that was a year the U.S. Embassy opened up after being closed for 54 years, I believe. So it was so good to see the American flag flying there in front of the U.S. Embassy. And let's see. And we visited Artist Studio. We visited Gloria Herlando. She's a filmmaker. She listened to her talk. It was marvelous. And we visited the studio of Adonis Flores. I think you may be familiar with him because he has work at the Pizzuti collection. He works across media, but he's a photographer and he deals a lot with the military. I believe he fought in Angola. And then Sandra Ramos, she lives in Miami, but she is able to travel back and forth between Havana and Miami, and her mother and sister run her home studio, or they give presentations like they did with us of her work, and offer workshops and that kind of thing. She explores the national. I mean, she casts herself as a protagonist in all these paintings. This is oil on canvas. She does a lot, I think, of printmaking. And then about at the same time I returned, the paintings continued to unravel, and I was focusing more on that presence. They were dense, and they were like scraped out. So all those things, I think, helped to my goal of capturing that human presence, the history of the work. And this is still that light area, I think, is a canvas again. And here's another one. Some were more dense, some were more successful. I'm not sure about this, but but it happened. And then sometimes it would take this kind of look, but I was still after the same thing. I think I've been after the same thing all my life. And then in 2019, I was part of the Havana Biennial in Matanzas, the city of Matanzas. This is an installation, but this was in the Havana Biennial proper. And I just think this is so incredible. It's a painting. And I'm not sure if it was a Cuban artist that made these, but what these artists do with little resources is just incredible. And then someone incorporated these cloth or paper into the facade of the crumbling building, which I think is beautiful. This year, that time, I was able to make time to visit my playmates. So that's Henry. We grew up together. He was my next door neighbor in Cuba. And I thought this time I would try to go to his house and see if I could find him, but I didn't have to. So I was walking up the sidewalk. There was a man hanging out the window. And I said, is Henry here? He said, I'm Henry. And I said, I'm Elsie, I'm your playmate. And he came running down and took us up, and we had Cuban coffee, and it was a delight. And then so on the way out, I asked him about Lily on the right. She was also a playmate that lived across the street. And he said, you're in luck because she just moved back from, I think it was South America. And she lives around the corner. So we go and ring the doorbell. And I think we woke her up because she was going to be traveling the next day. But I saw Lily and spent some time talking. And that was very rewarding. These are the two paintings that was at the Havana Biennial in Matanzas. They're large paintings. They made it in one piece. The one on the right, I kept working after it came back. So that's why it was finished into 2025. Wonderful experience. And then when I came back, I decided that, I don't know if I felt some liberation or what, but I started leaving paintings loose. Like I probably would have gone back to this painting and developed it more, but I let it sit there. I mean, I let it sit there for a year or so, thinking, what am I going to do? I mean, if I'm being honest with myself, I'll just leave it, you know? And so I left it, and I don't know what's going to happen, if I'm going to continue to work maybe a little looser. I'm not sure. But at the same time, the paintings were still dense and worked, and still trying to capture what I've always wanted to. Sometimes the shapes were more encapsulated, and sometimes they were looser. That's pretty dense and pretty intense, I think. So like I say, I mean, I usually have to dig myself out of a hole to connect. It's like someone once said to me, I think in some of these professors, I hear their voices still, you know, said, well, the paintings have to earn their keep, and they have to earn. And it's true. I mean, it takes forever just to connect with these things. And then as a result of that looser painting, I started doing these drawings on just ink on paper, very fast at a sitting, without looking up much, just trusting myself. And these, yeah, more of these. These are actually on paper, oil on paper, but still they were done relatively fast. So I don't know where I'm headed. I never know, you never know, but I'll keep working and see what happens. And then these are the pieces at the show honoring Sue. What I did was just take remnants of Sue's installation, her last installation, which Karen and Char gave to us. And the only thing in that sheer reddish fabric were the vertical lines that ended up in those tie knots but down there. And so I put it around a canvas, and I thought I would collaborate with her, and I would start working around her lines. And then these pucker developed just as I was sewing, and I just let things be. And I thought Sue would really find this funny because, she had such a sense of humor. And so me sewing and that kind of thing, but it was really liberating to do something different. And this happened the same thing. It just took a remnant. The semicircle at the bottom had some kind of piece of cloth that was round and it was hanging there. So I ripped it out and left the torn piece there. And I responded to its form. I thought it looked like a passage, maybe a passage from life to death, death to life, life to life, whatever, you know? And so that's how this started. So that the only thing there was that semicircle torn area and two vertical it looked sewn lines, and everything else just I made. And here is the show that Barb, Leah, Sue, and I had at the Mansfield Arts Center. I think it was 2019. So, and that's Sue's piece. And I was just thought I would show you her wonderful work. And I'll leave it with this one. This was in front of Angela Maleka Gallery. I don't know how long ago that was, but there's Sue in her hat.
That's wonderful. Elsie, thank you so much for that. I think this is a perfect time for us to do some Q&A. I took a couple of notes while you were chatting, and I am struck with, before I go there, folks, if you have questions, please type them. I will absolutely read them out to Elsie. What I really noticed in your progression was this deep attuning to your work and what you needed from it, and how you have evolved in that from even at the very beginning. You know, many artists start with realism and
Right.
then break from that. And I really enjoyed how you contextualized it about your interest in color fields. And what struck me was those color fields have this softness and calmness, but also an unease, because there's an unknown in that. Like there's some edges that beg a viewer to figure it out. And I see that in the really frenzied work that you move to. So you move from these color fields and then to this really organized, frenetic kind of discipline that still has organic feels to it. And then like pushing past that into this like really deeply pulsating work. And so I would love for you to talk a bit about the importance of staying present with what you need from the work and what the work needs from you.
I mean, it's very important for me to have a give and take with these paintings. You know, someone once mentioned to me, well, I think you just want too much out of your work. But you know what? I think I want to connect. I want them to satisfy me, I figure, you know, because if I'm going to do this for a living, I want to do something that's meaningful for me, or else I'll be doing something else. So, I mean, I have to go around in circles and, you know, play with this thing and try to listen to it. At some point, I have to just aggressively do something that sort of moves things along. And, you know, and then that move could just be, why, you know, not good, and go back and listen to it. So it's this interaction that I need to have with this work, so that it satisfies me on a lot of levels. You know, a level I can't even explain, really. It's something that I just see, and then I say, okay, I can live with that. You know, if I can't live with it and I try to leave it, eventually it just, it's not going to work. I have to come back and deal with it. It's like a nurturing.
Mhm.
I mean, that's how I work, and it's nuts.
Can you talk a little bit about, color? There was
Color?
a really I mean, there's a significant period of time where you have these really intense warm colors that feel almost aggressive, right?
Yes,
They're,
yes.
yeah, chat a bit about that.
So I think the most aggressive colors were when I didn't have, they weren't so complicated, maybe. Uh, but as they became more complicated, I didn't want the color to interfere because there's so much going on. Have one more thing interfere with the meaning of these paintings. So I started to push the color back. So even though I have a lot of color in there, it's kept at bay, sort of. I mean, when you look at them, it's like an overall, maybe color field. I don't know. But when you get close, you see a lot of colors that I keep denying as I paint. So if it's too much, it's going away. You know, not so that the bright color doesn't interfere, because I can't imagine having all this going on and then have a bright color. I mean, wouldn't be able to concentrate on it.
We have a question from Stephanie that would like to know, can you talk about the tools you use to paint? Is there anything unusual?
Well, when I was doing the more let's see, not the ones that were more even and encapsulated, and I used a lot of knives to dig in, like palette knives, and also like to take the paint off because some of them are small. I would use a lot of Q-tips with like paint thinner to take off the paint. So whatever needs to happen, I use, like I've used stripper before, to sort of kickstart this thing. But
Absolutely.
yeah, a lot of yeah, Q-tips and knives and some dental tools.
Anything that will do the job.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So Alice says, I love how you work to bring meditation and agitation into your paintings. Was wondering if current political climate is influencing the direction of your work.
Oh, yeah, probably so. Yeah, I think more than ever, we need to find some peace and in the work, or something personal and something. Yeah, yeah, and I think so.
Elsie, can you talk a little bit about how you know a piece is finished?
I think it's when I like walk by it for like 2 weeks or something, and then I say, okay, because sometimes it's like I look at it and I go, I mean, I'm fooling myself. Who are you fooling? I mean, really. And so I have to like get very sober and say, what's going on here? Why are you doing this? And then I keep going till it does something for me. I don't, even if it doesn't look very good or whatever, but as long as it satisfies me spiritually and physically, because I need both, the physical paint, but also that sublime and spiritual kind of fulfillment.
So you talked a little bit about how you had a bit of a liberation after your trip
Mhm.
that set you free to move off of the canvas. Um, so you moved into paper and
Yeah,
things with paper. And then for this exhibition, you worked with something that you
never,
haven't worked with at all.
never.
But it's still your voice. Can you talk a little bit about how you navigated that and like
Yeah.
how you knew these pieces were finished.
Yeah, I mean, so it took me a long time to figure out what I was going to do because at the beginning I thought, gosh, this is so beautiful. It's just done. One of Sue's pieces just hanging on the wall. And so it took months for me to say, well, if I'm going to make this work, I have to make it mine somehow. And so it just occurred to me, well, yeah, I mean, I can use my canvas, I can use paint, and then I can use the thread, start using thread that Sue used. And it just like it came, and it was, yeah, by virtue of of the needle and thread, I really couldn't push as much as I normally would with a painting. So I like that because I didn't impose myself and withdraw and all this stuff. I just I just thought, okay, it's done because I can't do any more to it. I mean,
That's great. That's great.
but it was fun. It was at a good time for me to do something different.
So before the talk uh, started, we had a little bit of a chat about a really important community piece for your practice. I would love for you to chat about the importance of your group that does critiques with each other, and you have a few folks that are in that critique group in this image. Talk about the importance of community in your art making.
Yes, I mean, so we have a group that we meet monthly and it's via Zoom, and so we take turns sharing our work and then get feedback from the members. And we're trying to be very honest with each other, and it's very helpful. It started during the pandemic, and some of the members moved away. Paula moved to Oregon. Alice and Paula moved away, and Anne, but then Ann Keener moved away, but then she's back in Columbus now. So we still see each other, even though some of them live in other states, and it's just it's very rewarding because I deleted my social media account, so I feel like I live in a vacuum sometimes. So it's really good for me. And hopefully for them, it's very good.
We have another question from our audience from Joe, who said, "Hi, Elsie, it's Joe. The first piece he remembers of yours was Sanctuary. And as he was thinking about your pieces, the words vibrant and brightness, I imagine long, continuous brush strokes that are done quickly and spontaneously. And he's curious to know, is that how you paint the big oil paintings?"
No, no. I used to paint more with layers and just big layers and leaving it and then removing some of it. These are more done in pieces sometimes, so it becomes like a give and take, like put, take off, put, take off. It's different, you know. Uh, yeah, it's
Is the
become
importance
different. And so I think you can see the struggle more, or I think, and you can see me more like, the imperfections of, scrape or the wound or whatever.
We have from Melinda, says, "Wonderful work. Thank you for this story starting in Cuba. It seems you have always had a structure that has organically evolved, but with its roots in Cuban altars. Do you feel like the work is still rooted in Cuban culture? And can you elaborate?"
I don't know. I feel like, I mean, all these layers, all the layers in the Cuba, everything's layered, the buildings, the floors, everything is just layered. Uh, and I think so, but but I can't pinpoint what it is. I feel so. I feel like I want I want these paintings like sort of to be alive. And I think that, you know, Cuban people are so alive. They're just so full of life, no matter what, you know, what's going on, that festive, you know, feel, the liveliness, you know, even though these paintings are sort of, you know, contemplative and, you know, agitated. There's a lot of hope, you know, just like Cuba. But I think so. I mean, I think because I'm both. I feel like I'm very much Cuban and I'm very much American. Uh, you know,
Yeah,
so.
that's
Mm.
great. We have another question comment from Lindsay. In this exhibit, do you feel like you were conversing with your old friend again? And also, she hopes that you feel the nods of approval and gasps at the beauty of your work and your story.
Oh, oh, that's so, thanks, Linz. um, I did. I felt like I was absolutely communicating with her. You know, I just kept thinking of her sense of humor when I was doing this. Kept him light. She has such a sense of humor, and she just went on with her work, not second guessing anything, just running with it. And absolutely, and I think of her a lot.
That's wonderful. So, um, perhaps we can wrap this with you sharing. I think it's really important for folks to remember the humanity of artists, and like a lot of folks will mystify artwork, and I think that there is a quality to that. Like it doesn't just appear. There's a lot of work, a lot of history that goes into making the works that are successful. But I think it's really important for artists to kind of share what they offer as um, a way to get through either roadblocks, or so for anyone that is coming into the arts or is struggling with their work, what suggestion do you have for them to get back to it or feel reconnected?
Yeah. So if you hit like a
Yeah,
roadblock, something,
yeah.
I just I walk away. You know, I just walk away and go to my yard, do a little weeding, just because if I stay here, what's going to happen? I'm going to suffocate this work. I'm going to impose what I want it to be as listening to it. So I walk away, and when I come back, I mean, it's a totally different story. You can see clearly, you know, just and not judge so much if it's good or bad, just to satisfy. I mean, I don't anymore. You know, if it's whatever, if just as long as it's satisfying, it doesn't matter if it's dense or if it's like overwhelming or whatever. Don't judge too much. I also like some, I don't know, one of my professors comes to mind now. He said, there is no painting patrol, you know, so you're free to, you know, nobody's watching over you. So just keep that in mind and just, you know, look inside yourself and not worry, but you got to police yourself, I guess, you know. But
I love that.
I walk away and do other things. It's a, you know, it's a good thing that you know, I live with my dad. My dad lives with me, so he'll need something, and it'll just get my mind off of this. I'm forced to change gears and come back to it. Just keep going, whatever.
I love that. So if anyone wants to see more of your work, where should they go?
Well, my elsiesanchez.com is my website, which I have to update.
Perfect. So folks, if you are looking for more of Elsie's work, please make sure you check that out. I think the works that you have in this exhibition, A Common Thread, are really a wonderful, wonderful kind of extension and exactly that, that kind of partnering with Sue, the late Sue Kavanaugh. So thank you so much for not only being a part of this exhibition, but for the generosity of your time and talent in giving this artist talk, Elsie.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
And thanks everybody for joining us. This was an artist talk by Elsie Sanchez as a part of our programming for A Common Thread. Special thank you to the curators as well as the other participating artists, the Ohio Arts Council's board, the Ohio legislature, the governor who supports the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everyone and have a great
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.